You thought awakening would bring peace, but all you found was silence. A dense silence. A silence that weighs like an invisible presence in the room. An emptiness that doesn't scream, but consumes. Rumi said, "What you seek is seeking you." But what if what seeks you is emptiness? What if what you call longing is just the echo of your soul trying to warn you? You trusted. You believed. You gave yourself completely to people who looked at you with kindness, but they were hiding knives behind their smiles. They said they loved you, but their love came silently when you needed it most. It came with an absence disguised as a presence. I only treated you with affection when you were useful, and you stayed. You stayed waiting for things to change. You stayed believing you could fix them. You gave so much of yourself that you forgot about yourself. And now the question is asked, why does it still hurt, even after waking up? The truth is uncomfortable. Not everyone who smiles at you wants you to get better. Some smile to keep you captive, to watch you bleed slowly, because their light bothers them, and erasing you little by little makes them feel in control. You need to distance yourself from those who smiled while silently stabbing you in the back. And no, it's not selfishness. It's self-care. It's a real awakening. Because there is a violence that doesn't come with shouts but with absences, with compliments that sound fake, that feeling of being alone even when you're next to someone. Can you feel it? That tightness in your chest that has no name. But what always comes up when that person gets close? This is not love. It's emotional manipulation disguised as affection. It's poison diluted in pretty words. And you know, deep down, his soul always knew. But you chose to believe the pretty version of the story. Because you loved. Because you saw potential. Because you believed that everyone could change. But now you're waking up. And waking up hurts. Because you start to see who was really by your side, and who only walked with you until they saw you weak enough to knock you down. Rumi wrote, "Don't settle for stories about how things happen to others. Awaken your own legend. You no longer need to be a secondary character in the narrative of the person who hurt you." The soul grew tired of pretending. The wound has already spoken too loudly. And the emptiness, it's no longer bearable. If everything inside you is telling you it's time to go. So perhaps the silence is the cry of your soul pleading for liberation. And that's what we're going to talk about now. But before continuing, take a deep breath. Feel what this silence is trying to show you. If any part of this beginning resonated with you, write it in the comments below. I felt that smile before, the one that hurts silently, because you are not alone. And putting it into words is the first step towards liberation. This video is not just another piece of content, it's a mirror of your soul. Each phrase here was crafted to touch where no one usually touches. So if you're ready to dive deeper into this healing journey, leave a like now. This shows that this kind of truth needs to continue to be told. Subscribe to the channel, because you deserve to walk alongside someone who understands your pain and transforms it into light. Let's move on. There's still much your soul needs to remember. You began to see beyond the illusions. He began to realize that much of what he believed to be true was, in fact, a reflection of fear, from the fear of being alone, from the fear of not being loved, from the fear of not being enough. And suddenly, everything that once made sense, the relationships, the promises, the smiles, began to lose its color, as if the veil were falling, as if the world, once full of noise, were revealing the profound silence that had always been behind it. And it is at this moment that the emptiness appears, an emptiness that doesn't hurt like a stab wound, but like a persistent silence. It's not despair, it's absence. It's not sadness, it's the feeling of being between worlds. You look at the life you had before and realize you don't want that anymore. But when you look ahead, you don't see anything built yet. It's like being in the middle of the desert, thirsty for something you can't even name. It's as if I'm floating between realities. You no longer belong to who you used to be, but he still doesn't know who he's becoming. This is the space between the old and the new, the sacred ground for the reconstruction of the soul. Rumi said, "The wound is the place through which the light enters you." But nobody told you that before the light comes the darkness. This darkness has a name, transition. You are on break, in the space between the end and the rebirth. And that's scary because we've been conditioned to fear emptiness, filling everything up urgently, distractions, messages, empty promises. But the emptiness after waking up is an invitation, not a punishment. It's the soul saying, stop running away, sit here, and listen. Listen to what your body has been screaming for years. Listen to what your intuition whispers when everything is silent. Listen to the pain you've been pushing under the spiritual rug. Yes, because awakening isn't just about light, mantras, and peace. It's like tearing yourself apart inside. It's realizing that you allowed too much, remained silent for too long, accepted crumbs for fear of receiving nothing. You begin to understand that many people haven't abandoned you. They were simply never really there. You just wanted to believe they were. And that emptiness you feel now, it comes from the withdrawal of those illusory presences. You are dealing with emotional withdrawal from relationships that were not nourishing you. And like any addiction, the purification process hurts. Not because you still want that, but that's because his system is still adjusting to the absence of the lie he once called love. This is where many souls get lost. They return to what was toxic, just to avoid feeling this silence. They return to those who smiled and stabbed, because at least there was something there, even if it was pain disguised as affection. But now, something about you has changed, and that is why the emptiness is screaming. Because your soul will no longer accept less than it deserves. She is hungry for the truth, through actual presence, for affection that doesn't hurt, through words that don't cut, through a silence that welcomes, not one that abandons. This is the most delicate moment of spiritual awakening. It's not when you feel peace. It's when everything inside you is at war, but you know you can't go back. You feel the ground disappearing beneath your feet. Reality seems to float. The days seem too long, and the nights emptier than ever. But it is precisely there that the true healing begins. Because true healing doesn't begin when you feel better. It begins when you choose to stop numbing yourself, when you stop running from yourself. And she begins to confront each part that hurt, each memory that still weighs heavily, each love that still burns. Not in a hurry, not with hatred, but with the courage of someone who has finally understood that avoiding pain is what makes it last. Yes, you may be feeling directionless, as if everything had lost its shine, but perhaps it's not that the world has lost its shine. Perhaps now, you are seeing things as they truly are, and it is only in reality that the new is born. It is at this point in the journey that the true awakening begins, because waking up isn't enough. You have to decide to stay awake, even when everything inside you is telling you to go back to sleep, even when you miss someone terribly, even when memories try to make you believe that the past was better. It was more comfortable, perhaps, but it was never true love. Rumi said, "Why do you stay in prison when the door is wide open? You are not empty, you are clean. You are emptying yourself of the versions of yourself that needed to please others in order to be loved, shedding the burdens she carried to fit into places that were never hers. And this lightness may seem strange at first, because you've gotten used to carrying too much. So now, what do you do with all this space inside you? You fill it with presence. That's true, with love that begins with you, with a silence that heals, not one that abandons, with choices that make no apologies for existing, with separations that hurt at first, but set you free in the end. And what if everything you're feeling right now is reverberating inside you? Write in the comments, "I'm halfway there, but I'm not turning back," because that's the phrase of someone who understood that emptiness is not the end. It's the gateway, and whoever crosses over is never the same again. Emptiness isn't the problem, and it's a reflection of what you tried to hide for so long. A reflection of the pain you dressed up with smiles, the sadness you stifled with distractions, the fear you disguised with quick spirituality, ready-made phrases, hasty cures. Now, with your soul awakened, you can no longer ignore it. The surface you used to inhabit no longer sustains you, and no matter how hard you try to return, it no longer recognizes you. What you called routine has become a prison. What you called love has become noise. What you called yourself has become a shell. This is the moment when the soul begins to undress. But to be reborn, it needs to die. Not in the body, but in the identity that was shaped by the expectations of others, by the need to be accepted, by the urgency of not being abandoned. And dying, even symbolically, is a solitary process. It is the exact point where silence settles in, a silence that is unsettling, not because it is empty, but because it echoes everything you avoided feeling. It is in this space between the old and the new that this silent pain resides. A pain that doesn't scream but consumes you from within. A pain that doesn't show up in exams, but reveals itself in your eyes. Eyes that try to smile at the world but plead for help when alone. This is the pain of conscience. The pain that only appears when you finally begin to see with the eyes of the soul, to see what has always been there but you didn't want to see, because seeing hurts. It hurts to realize that you erased yourself to fit into places that diminished you. It hurts to realize that you gave yourself to people who only drained you. It hurts to realize that the love you offered was never truly returned. And this pain, it is sacred. It is the birth pain of your new version. Rumi said, "You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens." That is the process. And nobody talks about it in a real way. Many talk about awakening as if it were a garden of peace and light, but the beginning is ruin. It is a fall. It is confrontation. Because for the light to enter, the wound needs to be wide open. The soul needs to be torn where it is still trapped. And the greatest prison is emotional. It is relational. It is built with the traumas you normalized, with the absences you romanticized, with the rejections you tried to ignore. Now, with the pain emerging, you can no longer hide. Because awakening isn't something you decide. It's something that happens to you. And when it begins, there's no going back. The pain you feel is the truth trying to emerge. It's your being trying to break free from the distorted versions you created to survive. But surviving is no longer enough. Your soul wants to live. It wants to exist fully. It wants to love consciously. It wants to breathe without fear. It wants to break free from those who smiled and stabbed you in the back in silence. And here lies the paradox. The pain you feel now isn't because you're broken. It's because you're healing. Suffering increases when the lie loses ground. Anguish comes when the illusion crumbles. And what remains is raw, yet fertile ground. It's where everything can begin. But first, everything needs to collapse. Do you feel it? That urge to run away and, at the same time, to stay. That urge to scream and, at the same time, to be silent. That's your old self resisting. Because the pain of awareness isn't the pain of the end. It's the pain of resisting change. Often this pain comes disguised, in the form of longing for those who hurt you, in the form of clinging to what's already over, in the form of guilt for distancing yourself from people who were once everything to you. But the soul knows. It knows it needs to die to what it was, that it needs to detach itself from bonds that only existed in the ego, that it needs to be silent to hear what truly matters. And that's why, even with fear, you remain here, because something inside you has already understood, has already accepted, has already begun the process. The emptiness you feel is the womb of your rebirth. It didn't come to punish you, but to prepare you, because those who are reborn cannot carry the same shackles. And this pain that seems unbearable is the last resistance. It's the soul saying, it will hurt, but it will pass. It will break, but it will rebuild. This is the time of mourning for yourself. The time to say goodbye to the version that bowed too much, that begged too much, that was silent too much. And at the same time, it's the time to prepare space for who you are becoming. You may not see it clearly now, but something is growing inside you. Something new. Something more real, deeper, more yours. And it all begins when you stop running from the pain and start listening to it, because the pain of awareness is not punishment. It's a sign. It's proof that you're breaking free from autopilot. It's the mark that your soul is alive and tired of surviving on so little. It's ready to break free. If this process is happening to you, if you are also feeling this pain that you can't name, but you know is real, write in the comments, "My soul is awakening," even if it hurts. Because the simple act of writing already begins to open up space for this new version that finally wants to be born. You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens. These words of Rumi are not empty poetry. They are raw, exposed truth. They are the spiritual translation of what you have been feeling for so long and didn't know how to name. The emptiness that embraces you is not just an absence, it's a calling. A deep, almost silent but incessant calling. It arises when everything around you seems to be moving forward, but inside you there is a silence that weighs more than any spoken word. This is the point where many believe they are lost, but in reality, they are only beginning the journey. The spiritual root of emptiness isn't the lack of something external. It's not the absence of love from others, of success, of companionship, of direction. The root of emptiness lies in the disconnection from who you truly are. And this disconnection happens when your soul is forced to live in characters you created to survive. Characters that were accepted, but not truly loved. Characters that pleased, but didn't represent you. And when the soul awakens, these characters begin to fall one by one. It is in this internal collapse that the most silent grief is born. Grief for oneself. The grief of losing an old identity is cruel because it's invisible to the world. No one sees you crying inside for leaving behind a version of yourself that, although a prison, also gave you some security. But the soul no longer wants comfort. It wants what is true. And what is true demands surrender. And surrender demands symbolic death, dying to the ego that tried to control everything, to the inner voice that told you not to bother anyone, to smile when it hurt, to love those who only knew how to drain you. That ego that taught you it's better to be accepted than to be whole. That ego that believed being loved meant becoming useful, submissive, invisible. The spiritual root of emptiness is the cleansing of this lie. It's when you begin to realize that everything you did to feel complete was, in fact, an escape. That the relentless pursuit of acceptance was, in essence, an attempt to fill a void that only connection with your soul can fill. But this connection requires space. And for that space to exist, everything that is false needs to fall. Everything that was created to protect you now imprisons you. And that's why the heart needs to break. Because only in breaking does it open. The pain of this breakup is not punishment. It's alchemy. The soul is trying to remember who you were before the fear, before the rejection, before the need to adapt, to be loved. This sacred memory of your essence is resurfacing, but for it to take hold, the old must die. And like all grief, there are phases: denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and finally, acceptance. Acceptance that you are no longer who you used to be. Acceptance that some people will no longer make sense, that some paths will close, and that this is necessary. It's not the end. It's the beginning of truth, the beginning of alignment between what you feel and what you live, the beginning of the courage to say no to what no longer nourishes your soul, because the emptiness isn't punishing you. It's returning you to yourself. It's silencing the noise so you can hear the only voice that truly matters. Your own, the true voice. The one that was silenced for years in the name of others' acceptance. The one that was ignored so relationships wouldn't end. The one you pushed to the depths of your soul every time you felt you were going against expectations. Now she's back. With strength, with pain, with clarity. And she demands courage from you. Because living from the soul isn't comfortable. It's radical. It's lonely sometimes. But that's where freedom lies. You no longer need to convince yourself that everything is all right when it's not. You no longer need to smile at those who hurt you, nor remain silent in the face of what hurts you. The awakened soul wants presence, truth, and peace. Not that superficial peace that comes from conformity, but the profound peace that is born from integrity with what one feels. That's why the ego needs to die, because it feeds on control, approval, and appearances. And the soul is nourished by silence, authenticity, and love that asks for nothing in return. This internal conflict between what dies and what is born is what creates the void. But this void, despite seeming like the end, is the space where everything begins. It's the fertile ground where your new version will grow. Not that idealized version, but the whole one. The one that knows what it wants, understands where it hurts, and is no longer afraid to be who it is. And while this process unfolds, the world around you will continue to turn. People will continue talking about goals, success, and distractions. But you will be in another time, an inner time, a sacred time, a time when every pain becomes a seed, every tear becomes water, every silence becomes soil. And this cannot be rushed. Rebirth requires patience, compassion, and respect for one's own rhythm. Because what is being healed now is not small. It is the root. It is the foundation of your existence. And healing the root requires stopping everything, looking inward, and accepting what emerges. If you are going through this time, this inner grief, this silent death of who you once were, know that you are not alone. Thousands of souls are going through this same process right now, but few have the courage to continue, to go deep, to not run from the void. And if you are here, reading this far, it is because your soul has already decided, even with fear, even with pain, even without guarantees, it has decided to live truthfully. And if these words resonated with you, if you felt something inside you was touched, write in the comments, "I accept the grief over my former identity," because saying this, even silently, is the beginning of the liberation your soul has been asking for so long. What no one has told you is that this emptiness you feel is not a mistake. It's not a spiritual failing. It's not punishment for not having done everything right, nor a penalty for having trusted too much, loved too much, believed too much. The emptiness, however disconcerting it may be, is a space of revelation. It's where everything you've tried to hide begins to emerge. It's where the masks fall, the noise ceases, and the soul finally has a chance to speak. And what it says, you may not yet be able to translate into words, because what's happening to you now isn't just any emotional collapse. It's a return, a reunion, a kind of silent rebirth. Emptiness is the womb of the sacred. Rumi knew this when he wrote about the pain that opens the heart. He knew that silence was not absence, but preparation. That darkness was not the end, but the womb where conscious souls are born. Most people try to flee from emptiness as if trying to escape a fire, but the truth is that it didn't come to burn you. It came to purify, to dissolve everything that is not you, to erase the stories that taught you to diminish yourself, to be silent, to accept less than you deserve. What you feel now is this profound process of purification. And yes, it is confusing, because for years, perhaps decades, you were trained to fear silence, to avoid pain, to run from discomfort. But now your soul is returning home, and the soul's home isn't made of certainties, safe routines, or external approvals. The soul's home is made of truth, of presence, of connection with something that goes beyond what the eyes can see. This return is what generates discomfort, because when you begin to approach who you truly are, everything that was built to distance you from that begins to crumble. The fragile relationships, the borrowed desires, the goals based on validation, everything loses its meaning. And what remains is this space. Empty, yes, but full of potential, full of soul, full of possibilities that you can't yet see, but that have already begun to be born within you. This emptiness isn't a hole, it's a field, fertile ground. But for something to flourish there, you need to let go of what no longer serves you. You need to stop watering what hurts you. Stop insisting on what exhausts you. Stop going back to what always makes you feel worse. What nobody told you is that emptiness is the beginning of a new life. But only those who don't give up halfway through the journey flourish. And you're in the middle of it, I know. Because whoever gets this far in this video, whoever listens to this point is in this process. They're facing the fear of having no ground left to stand on. They're living with the absence of answers. They're feeling their soul yearning for something they can't name. But that's precisely where the hidden key lies. The silent secret that no one taught you. It's in this vulnerable state that you begin to access something that isn't in books, nor in ready-made phrases on social media. You begin to access your own wisdom. And it comes subtly. It comes in moments of profound exhaustion when you feel you can't take it anymore, and yet you continue. It comes in moments of silent crying when you realize you are stronger than you imagined. It comes when you, even lost, choose to stay, choose not to run, choose to breathe deeply and feel everything until the end. This is the beginning of the soul returning home. It's when you stop being reactive and start being present, when you stop seeking the approval of others and begin to seek coherence within yourself. When you understand that you no longer need to convince anyone of your worth, that you no longer need to explain yourself, justify yourself, shrink yourself to be loved. The love you were looking for outside was inside, hidden behind so many layers, so many fears, so much need to be something you were taught to be. Now, little by little, these layers are falling away, and what emerges is not a perfect version of yourself. It's a whole version. A version that knows it will still feel fear, will still feel pain, will still be confused, but that has finally chosen to stop running from itself. And that's all. Because true freedom is not the absence of pain. It's presence in pain. It's the courage to stay when everything in you wants to run. It's the deep surrender to the process, even without knowing where it will lead. It's trusting that your soul knows the way, even if your mind still screams for control. This is the hardest return there is, the return to yourself, because you'll have to leave behind those who no longer understand this new phase of your life. You'll lose bonds that only existed because you were someone else. You'll find yourself silent while the world demands haste. You'll feel alone at parties, empty in crowds, a stranger where you once felt comfortable. But this discomfort is sacred. It's a sign that something is being reborn, and rebirths are always solitary, because they are internal, because no one can go through it for you. But whoever does, doesn't return the same. They return light. They return present. They return whole. If you feel that this emptiness is more than just an absence, if you feel that it is cleansing you, deconstructing you, preparing you, write it in the comments. I'm going back home. This sentence is not just an answer. It's a commitment, a reminder, a silent declaration that even without understanding everything, you've decided not to give up on yourself. Perhaps you've left a toxic relationship. Perhaps you finally managed to do what for so long was just a stifled thought in the back of your mind. To leave, to end it, to cut the tie, to close the door. And for a brief moment, it seemed that relief would come like a gentle breeze, like a breath of promised freedom. But it didn't come, or it did, and it didn't last long, because after the silence came the weight, and after the absence of the other person, appeared the absence of something even deeper, of yourself. You thought the pain would only be about losing the other person, but it wasn't them you lost. The wound that burns now is different. It's the pain of having lost pieces of yourself in the process of trying to be enough, of having molded yourself, silenced yourself, shrunk yourself, faded away day after day so that the other person would stay, so that the love wouldn't go away, so that that look of contempt would turn into care, so that that silence would turn into presence. But it never did. And the cruelest thing about all this is that, even after the end, you still feel that something is wrong inside you, and that something isn't longing for them. It's longing for yourself. It's the absence of your own soul. You gave so much of yourself to that relationship that now, even free, you feel incomplete, as if a part of you remained trapped in that dynamic. And perhaps it did. Perhaps you still carry in your body the memory of the touches that only came when it suited you, the memory of the sweet words that always came after an attack, the feeling of walking on eggshells all the time, the fear of being completely yourself, and that being too much, or not enough. The constant emotional vigilance of someone who learned that to love was to endure, that true love was to bear everything silently, with maturity and understanding. But that was never love. It was adaptation. It was emotional survival. You didn't love that relationship. You loved the version of yourself that believed things would change someday. And because you loved that hope, you stayed. You stayed even when it hurt, even when everything inside you begged you to leave. You blamed yourself for feeling too much, for demanding too much, for being difficult, when, in reality, you just wanted to be seen. You just wanted someone to see what you hid with so much effort, for someone to embrace what you never had the courage to show. But instead, what you received was indifference disguised as emotional coldness. It was distance justified as just my way of being. It was a lack of empathy disguised as maturity. And now, in the post-relationship period, in the silence that remains, what emerges is not just loneliness, it's confusion, because you no longer know who you are without the need to adapt. You became so accustomed to being what the other person needed that now you feel a void, where before there was only survival. But this void is the space for reconstruction. It is there that the key to your return lies. The emptiness you feel today is not an absence of love. It's an absence of yourself, of all the parts you abandoned to be loved, of all the dreams you shelved because they didn't fit into his routine, of all the silences you accepted to maintain peace. And it's at this point in the journey that most people are mistaken. They think they miss the person, but it's not the person they're missing. It's you. It's your essence. It's your spontaneity. It's your strength. It's that woman who laughed loudly, who dreamed without fear, who believed in reciprocity, the one who wanted to be whole, not half, the one who wanted to live deeply and not just survive the surface of a relationship, The one who faded away little by little, day after day, because they made you believe that feeling too much was a problem. It wasn't. It never was. Feeling too much was your soul trying to scream while you remained silent. It was your intuition begging to be heard. It was your body showing you that something was wrong, even when your mind tried to rationalize. Because the body never lies. The soul never truly falls silent. It only waits for the right moment to return. And when it returns with a vengeance, with memories, with tears, with longing for yourself. And that longing hurts, but it also liberates. Now you begin to remember what you enjoyed before all of this, to remember what made your eyes sparkle, to remember what you sacrificed in the name of a love that was never whole. You begin to reconstruct your story, to piece it back together, to understand that freedom doesn't come ready-made. It comes in the form of silence, pain, discomfort, and that all of this is part of the cleansing, of rebirth, of returning home. You're returning, not to the past, but to your essence, to the woman you left behind while you struggled to hold on to something that, deep down, you already knew wasn't love. And this return is slow, but it's genuine. There are no shortcuts, no romanticization, only courage. Courage to face what was, to accept what hurt, to forgive yourself for staying, and to honor yourself for leaving. If all of this resonates within you, if you feel that this emptiness isn't longing for the other person, but longing for yourself, write it in the comments. I'm reconnecting with who I was before I lost myself, because only those who have been lost know the value of finding each other again. And that reunion is sacred. You are not empty, you are being rebuilt. And that difference changes everything. Because while emptiness seems like a definitive absence, rebuilding is a living, albeit silent process. You may not see the foundations forming, you may not perceive the structure being erected within you, but something is being built. Something of yours, something profound, something that doesn't yet have a defined form, but vibrates in every silence, in every tear, in every tired breath, where you decide to continue. It's not the end. It's the beginning of something your mind doesn't yet understand, but your soul already recognizes. This is the shift in consciousness that few talk about, because it has no glamour, no applause, no immediate reward. It's an internal, solitary, and often silent process. But it's precisely in this silence that the greatest transformations happen. You are remembering what is real. And what is real is almost always simple, almost always subtle, almost always unexplained. You begin to realize that what once impressed you now tires you, that what once held you captive now suffocates you, and that what once seemed like love, now you understand was masked neediness. Reconstruction begins when you stop chasing after what hurt you, when you no longer seek answers from those who only offered doubts, when you no longer beg for love from those who only knew how to offer intermittent presence, when you stop looking for signs and start listening to your own intuition, because it always knew. But now, finally, you are listening. Rumi said, "In silence there is eloquence. Stop and listen." And that's it. You stopped. You silenced yourself. And now you begin to listen, not to external voices, but to the inner truth, the one that was always there but was stifled by years of trying to fit in. This silence is sacred. It is not absence. It is voice. It is clarity. It is answer. But to hear it, you need to endure the discomfort that comes when everything around you demands haste. Haste to move on. Haste to forget. Haste to reinvent yourself. But the time of the soul is not the time of society. The time of the soul is cyclical. It is profound. It is wise. And it demands presence. It demands truth. It demands that you stay even when everything within you wants to escape. Because it is in this staying that healing happens. It is in permanence that reconstruction takes place. You're not late. You're coming back to yourself. And on the way back, you'll pass through dark places. You'll revisit versions of yourself that no longer make sense. You'll confront painful memories, choices that hurt, truths you didn't want to accept. But all of this is part of it. Because consciousness doesn't expand with comfort. It expands with truth. And truth isn't always beautiful, but it's liberating. And now you feel it. You feel that you can no longer lie to yourself. That you can no longer occupy spaces where your soul doesn't breathe, that you can no longer sustain relationships where you fall apart to be loved. Rebuilding requires letting go, and letting go is different from abandoning. Abandoning is running away. Letting go is liberating. It's looking with compassion at what was, giving thanks, learning, and moving on, even with a heavy heart, even with a trembling body, even with a screaming mind, because something inside you has already decided, has already crossed over, has already understood. The soul is choosing what is real, and what is real doesn't scream, doesn't beg, doesn't force. What is real simply is, present, whole, silent, and you are learning to inhabit this space, to be this presence, to live fully. Have you noticed how lately you've been feeling more? How you're more sensitive, more intuitive? How certain words affect you differently? How you sense the environment, people, intentions? This isn't weakness. This is awareness. This is your soul saying, now I am here. Now I am alive. Now I no longer accept crumbs. And this change, although it may seem lonely at first, is what will connect you with what truly matters, with what nourishes you, with what vibrates at the same frequency as your essence. You no longer need to adapt to what hurts you. You no longer need to force conversations that don't flow. You no longer need to carry the weight of stories that no longer belong to you. Now is the time for lightness. Lightness not as an escape, but as a conscious choice, as a result of the inner cleansing you've been doing. You are becoming who you always were, but had forgotten. And remembering yourself is a slow but profound process. And every time you choose yourself, even without guarantees, you take a step in this reconstruction. This shift in consciousness is not an event, it's a state where you understand that pain is not the enemy, that emptiness is fertile ground, that silence is wisdom, that time is an ally, and that you, even wounded, are whole. Whole enough not to settle for halves anymore, whole enough to wait for what is true, whole enough to sustain the necessary silence until life brings what resonates with your new frequency. If this makes sense to you, if any part of this process resonated within you, write in the comments. My reconstruction is silent, but real, because whoever writes this acknowledges that they are halfway there, that they are going through a difficult period, that they no longer need to prove anything to anyone, only to remain true to themselves. Perhaps awakening isn't about feeling good. Perhaps it never was. Perhaps the biggest misconception we've been sold about healing, self-knowledge, and spirituality is precisely this: the idea that light is always comfortable, that self-love is a constant state of peace, that mindfulness elevates us above pain. But what if, in reality, awakening is more about wholeness than well-being? What if the true path isn't about escaping pain, but about traversing it with presence? What if the emptiness you've tried so hard to avoid is precisely the soil where your wholeness begins to germinate? You are becoming whole, complete, and that is much deeper than any fleeting feeling of relief. Because well-being is fluid, it comes and goes, it dances with what happens around it. But wholeness remains. It is built when you accept all the parts you carry, those you are proud of and those you would rather forget, those that shine in the eyes of others and those you hide in the dark, those you expose and those you repress, even from yourself. And this process of radical acceptance is not light. It is not easy. It is not beautiful. But it is necessary. Being whole isn't about being happy all the time. It's about being whole even when sad. It's about staying connected to yourself even when everything seems to crumble. It's about knowing that there is value even in pain, that there is power in what is lacking, that there is revelation in what is silent. And this requires courage. Courage to look at your own emptiness without trying to fill it urgently. Courage to embrace solitude without turning it into despair. Courage to be with your shadow without trying to erase it. Rumi said that the wound is where the light enters, but he also knew that this light only enters where there is space. And emptiness, however uncomfortable it may be, is that space. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to embrace the parts of yourself that are pleasing, admired, and applauded? But what about the others? The parts that feel envy, anger, rejection, the parts that want to disappear, scream, hide. These parts are also you, and ignoring them is like trying to live only half a life. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be real. You need to be whole. And that includes chaos, mess, doubt, sadness, tiredness. Not as enemies to be eliminated, but as aspects to be acknowledged. When you stop fighting what you feel, you begin to realize that nothing there is a mistake. Everything is part of it. The gentle truth, the one that whispers when the noise ceases, is that you are exactly where you should be. Even if you don't understand, even if you don't see a way out, even if you don't feel relief. The gentleness of this truth isn't in promising you a happy ending now. It's in reminding you that there's a greater purpose behind every pain, that every fragment of your feeling carries an invitation to return to yourself, to remember who you are, to embrace yourself with more presence and less judgment. And I know, it's exhausting. Sometimes you look at yourself and think, will I ever rebuild myself? Will this pain ever go away? Will I ever trust, love, and believe again? And I tell you, yes, you will, but not in the way you knew it. Not like before. You won't go back. You will move forward. You will be reborn. You will rewrite your story with new eyes, with a different foundation, with deep roots that sprouted precisely from the space where you thought there was nothing left. And this strength that is being born within you now doesn't yet have a form, but it exists, and it is growing. Allow yourself to be whole. Allow yourself not to understand everything right now. Allow yourself to feel whatever comes, because wholeness doesn't demand constant consistency, it demands true presence. And only you know what you feel when you lay your head on the pillow. Only you know the extent of your silence. Only you hear the voice that whispers inside you when everything around you seems like noise. That voice is your soul reminding you that you are on the right path, that you don't need to pretend you're okay, that you can be vulnerable, that you can stop carrying the weight of appearing strong all the time. Because true strength lies precisely in allowing yourself to be real. You don't need another mask. You need acceptance. You need silence. You need an inner space where you don't have to perform, where you can simply exist. And that space, you are building it now. Every tear you shed waters that ground. Every pause you take cleans that space. Every no you say to what no longer represents you opens space for a yes to your soul. Wholeness is emerging there, behind the fear, behind the anxiety, behind what you can't explain with words. You are starting to feel again. And to feel is to be alive. If this process is happening to you, if any part of all this resonated with your soul, write in the comments, I choose to be whole, even with my broken parts. Because this silent and intimate choice is the beginning of your freedom. And whoever feels this, understands. It's not about going back to being who you were. It's about allowing yourself to be everything you are, including what is still being rebuilt. You felt the call. Perhaps it didn't come in words, perhaps it wasn't as clear as a revelation, but it was there, in the silence that began to bother you, in the discomfort in places that were once home, in the weariness of trying to maintain relationships that drained your soul. It arrived subtly, like a persistent unease, like that feeling that something inside you no longer fit within your own life. And even without knowing what was to come, you answered. You answered the call of your soul, the invisible invitation that pulled you inward, even when everything around you pushed you outward. And now, here, at this very moment, you are halfway there. No longer at the beginning, because the beginning has already been crossed. The rupture has already occurred. The silent decision to no longer emotionally violate yourself just to fit in has already been made. The separation, the pain of loss, the longing for yourself, the shattering of illusion have already happened. But it is not yet the end. Because the end does not exist for those who choose to live fully. There is a process. There is a journey. There is rebirth, day after day, between pauses and new beginnings. This middle ground where you are now is a sacred place, even if it seems chaotic, because it is here that everything is defined. Here is where you choose whether to continue trying to return to what has already died, or to move towards what is still being born. Here is where you stop searching for answers outside and begin to listen to the wisdom that comes from within. And this wisdom doesn't come with euphoria. It comes gently. It comes when you stop, when you breathe, when you accept that you no longer need to run or perform or prove yourself. It comes in the emptiness. Yes, in the void. That dreaded space, that misunderstood feeling, that absence that haunts you and that you've tried for so long to fill with noise, with people, with distractions. But now you know. The void is not the enemy. The void is the portal. It's the space where your new identity begins to take shape. where the seeds of your truth are planted, where the echo of your soul begins to strengthen, and even if it still hurts, even if it still seems dark, you no longer fear this silence, because now you recognize it is in it that healing resides. What you are experiencing is profound. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be compared. It cannot be underestimated. You are undergoing a transformation, and this process is more than beautiful. It is real. It tears you apart, but it also reveals you. It confuses you, but it also liberates you. It takes away your ground, but it begins to build wings that you will soon feel, because you are not losing yourself. You are finding yourself in a way you have never experienced before. It's possible that no one from the outside notices what's happening inside, but you know, you feel it. You wake up different. You think differently. You question everything. And even without answers, you continue, because there's something greater driving this process. And this something greater isn't external. It's your own soul. It's your consciousness awakening. It's your essence ceasing to whisper and beginning to command. And when that happens, everything changes. Even what seemed impossible begins to dissolve. You begin to realize that you no longer need to beg for attention, that you no longer need to cling to what doesn't hold up, that you no longer need to try to hold on to what has already shown that it's not for you. Because now you see yourself. Now you listen to yourself. Now you respect yourself. And that changes everything. Because when you truly begin to respect yourself, the external world starts to reorganize itself around you. What doesn't resonate falls away. What doesn't sustain you moves away. What isn't true reveals itself. And this, although frightening, is a blessing disguised as a loss. You are not alone. Even on days when it seems like no one understands, even on nights when loneliness screams, even in moments when the silence seems unbearable, you are not alone. There is an intelligence behind every movement, every pain, every emptiness, and that intelligence is guiding you back home. The home you build within, the home where you no longer need to abandon yourself to be accepted, the home where every part of you has space, even the parts that hurt. Don't rush. Don't compare yourself. Don't give up. Reconstruction happens silently. Healing doesn't make a fuss. The soul works while the mind still struggles. And one day, when you least expect it, you'll realize that the hole that once seemed impossible to fill has become a sacred space where peace now dwells. A silent, firm, real peace. A peace that doesn't depend on anyone, that doesn't need validation, that doesn't shout to be recognized. It simply is, because it was born from the journey. It was born from you. If you've made it this far, if you've read every word, if you've felt your soul throb along the way, write in the comments. I embrace the emptiness as part of my healing. This phrase is not just a statement. It's a reminder that you are alive, that you are present, and that emptiness is not the end. It's just the beginning of your truth. If you've stayed this far, it's because something inside you recognized this path, because this journey isn't rational, it's of the soul. And if this video spoke to parts of you that you might not even know how to name, then subscribe to the channel right now. Here, each video is a mirror of your truth, a safe space for those who are rebuilding themselves in silence, navigating pain with awareness and remembering who they truly are. If this touched your heart in any way, leave a like. It's through him that I know this type of content needs to continue. And now, watch the next video that's appearing on the screen. The journey doesn't end here. It has simply changed form, and I will be there, waiting for you, to walk with you through the next step of this healing process.